This is our May 13th, 2021 meeting, and today we will be covering the Good Neighbor Agreement. Next slide here. Dave has the night off with another obligation, but we still have a stellar group tonight. We'll start out the project with an update from Deputy Director Michelle Cheek. Then we'll turn to our main topic, the Good Neighbor language. Dan Spiker's back to help facilitate that conversation. We also have John Johnson and Kimberly Gupta here tonight to represent construction and operations. And then we'll save some time at the end of the meeting to discuss your ideas and input as a group. Let's go to the next slide. As a quick reminder, the Zoom toolbar is at the bottom of your screen. And when we ask that when you're not speaking, that you mute your mic and turn off your webcam. When you have ideas to share, please use your raise your hand tool. That's also in that little toolbar, or use the chat. So now I will turn it over to Michelle.
Hello there. I'm Michelle Cheek, the Deputy Program Director for the Bull Run Treatment Projects, and I'm filling in for David Peters tonight. I haven't been a regular attendee at these meetings, but I'm glad to be back and to give you an update on the project and to continue our conversations on the Good Neighbor Agreement and our commitment to that agreement. So I will start with project updates. So we've been continuing detailed design work on the filtration facility and plan to come back to you with an update on our design progress in June. We recently received Oregon Health Authority's approval of our preliminary planning work and also our pilot study findings. That approval primarily focused on the filter configuration and filtration rates. So we're excited to get that approval from the Oregon Health Authority. We also just completed 2 months of drilling work along the pipeline routes and at the facility site, and that will help guide the design of both the filtration facility and the associated pipelines. And then super exciting things happening today. A new silo, soda ash silo, was delivered to our Lusted Hill facility as part of the improved corrosion control treatment project. And that's a photo there of the silo being set into place today, just down the street from the filtration facility site. On the corrosion control project, just a heads up that we are planning a road closure as part of this project. We'll be installing a water line under Lusted Road, which will require closing Lusted Road to through traffic for a period of time. We'll have road signage and traffic controls in place during the work, and we'll be getting notices out to neighbors ahead of the road closure. And with that, I will turn it over to Dan Spiker, who most of you know already, and he's going to facilitate discussions on our Good Neighbor Agreement.
Great, thanks, Michelle. Again, Dan Spiker, supporting Portland Water Bureau with this effort. As Bonita mentioned, a big part of today's conversation is really about, it's been 2 months since we've had an interaction and engagement, at least in this setting. And we want to reiterate some things that we've heard and have been hearing over the course of the last few months. And the wording that you see here is a reminder that the intention of the Good Neighbor Agreement is to foster as much communication as possible and identify and resolve concerns as early as possible, and ultimately to make commitments the Portland Water Bureau will have in place as part of design, construction, operations, and certainly continued communication. So those 4 elements are what we're going to concentrate on today. All the topics that you see on the box on the right are embedded in the Good Neighbor Agreement, and there is an individual phrase and a series of bullets that helps to characterize each of those. We are going to review those quickly as part of our engagement, but tonight's interaction is not designed to look at every single word. Certainly, we've had the chance over the past 2 months to reflect upon those words and make any suggested improvements to those. So what you see in the forthcoming slides are actually words that were the ones you've read in your online review of the Good Neighbor Agreement language, and that the intention over the coming month is to allow for us and you to make one additional pass at these phrases and words. So we've received feedback over the course of the last few months and through a multiple set of avenues, site advisory group, of course, social media, Project e-news, and postcard mailings. And we're clearly hearing strong concerns and interests in learning more of communications, light, sounds, safety, and environmental impacts. So those are going to be some of the things we're going to reiterate today in our conversation as we hear in the order of Bonita, Michelle, John, and Kim in terms of these subject matters. Okay. I'll add one more thing before we go on, and that is, of course, if there's questions or comments, use the chat function as a reminder. Bonita always reminds us of that, if you have a question, if something's not clear, if you want to clarify something, please don't hesitate to raise your hand or to put a comment in the chat. Okay. So with that, let's move on to the next slide. So timing for the forthcoming months. We come to conclusion on our Good Neighbor Agreement phase of this engagement with you, the site advisory group, next month. So the intention is that over the course of the next 4 weeks, we have the chance to do the final review of this language. And that at that point, we will be presenting the final agreement documentation to this team on the 10th of June. And again, it won't be the first time you see the final language. That will be done electronically and through vehicles that allow you to read that material prior to June 10th. Okay. Then following that is going to be a series of additional neighborhood informational meetings. And we've heard from you collectively that there's an interest in communicating or continue this communication. So at a minimum, we have the September 2021 and also January 2022, yet of course to be detailed and scheduled, but the intention is to have informational meetings with you, site advisory group, and others in the neighborhood that like to listen to what's been happening, what milestones have been attained, what results have been accomplished, what is the project report out, what's been going on, and of course receive feedback and reactions. So that is going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing beyond our June 10th meeting, but having at a minimum those 2 sessions in September and January of the next calendar year. Okay. Let's go to the next slide. So, as I mentioned, these slides are a reflection of the language in the Good Neighbor Agreement, what we call draft language. We're still saying draft because we still have the option to make some improvements and changes to this. And I'm going to ask Bonita to talk to what this means to her in terms of communication, and in particular, hearing from her about how this continuity of communication is going to take place over the coming months. Bonita, thoughts, reactions?
Thanks, Dan. So I'll just jump right into the feedback that we've heard about this language. You know, some of people have talked about monthly updates. You go out to the public through mail or in local newspapers. This is some of the feedback that we received about the language. And, you know, printing and mailing is expensive. So we do try to be thoughtful about what we do send out, because if you're like me, 90% of what I get in the mail makes it direct line to the recycle bin. So we do send out newsletters and postcards, but we do want to try to limit what we do send out. And when we do, one of the things that we do as well is we send out an annual postcard to everybody that's within 5 miles of the project. So, and we encourage people to sign up for our e-news, but also if they would like to have information printed and sent to them, they can request that. So it's kind of a compromise that we have, that to be able to provide information to people that need it in mail or don't have access to computers, but then not spamming everybody that may not want our material. And so Daniel Newsbury, I see, says add neighbors. After neighbors, please add other stakeholders. Okay. And that's some more feedback that we received is that the Zoom meetings need to be held in person. And I want this too. We all want this. We don't like presenting in this manner. We want to be able to talk with people in person. We want to be able to see your faces and get a feel for what you're feeling. It's difficult to do in this environment. Even just with our meetings, it's difficult internally. So we are anxious to be meeting in person again too. And when we are able to do that, we will most definitely be doing that. I don't know if that's going to be next month or at our September meeting, but that is a goal for us. Another comment that we received was about conflict resolution, and hoping that it can involve an arbitrator or a neutral party. I am your primary contact, and we prefer to have concerns come through my team. Call me, send me an email, or use our online comment form. I think most of you know how to reach me, but contact information is on our website and published on most of our materials. When information comes through my team, then we can document and track those concerns. We can determine who the best person is to find a resolution, because it may not always be the person you might think it is. Most of the time, it will be the folk that we have here today. John is managing the construction, Kimberly is managing operations, Dave and Michelle, of course, are managing the project as a whole. And I'm here to help facilitate that. So that's where we are at with communications and the feedback that we received. Is there any questions or additional thoughts?
I have a question, actually, Bonita, and that is, we've heard also through the complement of overarching threads or themes on the online survey is, how do we know you're committed to this, that you're going to follow through and meet these words that are on this piece of paper? What's your reaction to that?
Well, and these are the people that are in charge, that are here. They're the ones that are going to be able to be your first line of recourse. They're the ones that are going to be able to handle that information. And that's why we have them here. I'm not the one that's making the decisions. I'm just the conduit to provide this information to them. So these are the people that are going to be held responsible. And I know that they're going to be coming back and talking about that a little bit too when they get to their sections. But also, we have the ear of the director, and she's going to be coming to our June meeting, and also expressing that accountability from an upper level.
Good. That's great to hear, Bonita. Awesome. Okay. Let's take a quick look at the chat. We reacted to the comment about adding the words "and other stakeholders" in the slide. Got that. That's great. That's part of our meeting results and the meeting minutes, and Aubrey will take a note on that. Okay. We are going to actually come back to communication at the end of our conversation to reiterate our timing together and a few other things. And with that, I think we're going to turn over to Michelle. Let me give a little bit of a backdrop here, and then have Michelle give some additional insight and reflection upon the comments we've been hearing. There's a lot of material here, and Aubrey can flip through these 5 slides pretty quickly. So there's architectural design. The next slide is associated with lighting. There's then one that follows about noise or sound design, and of course, mitigating noise or reducing noise. Then there's the landscape, of course, around the peripheral of the facility. And the last one is about stormwater. So those big five topics, all relative to design. Of course, ultimately, whatever is designed will move into construction, and then, of course, Kim's operation. but design is where we are now. So that's where we want to focus the energy on these 5 elements, is on how we think about design and what is moving into the incorporation of these commitments into the design process. So with that, Michelle, reflections about what we've been hearing and your reactions.
Fantastic. So before I jump into some of my topics that I wanted to cover today, I'd like to state my commitment to the Good Neighbor Agreement. As Dan and Benita mentioned, we've heard multiple comments and concerns regarding our commitment to the Good Neighbor Agreement and enforcement of the agreement, and how are we going to do that. So we are here today, John, Kim, David, well, myself and David, who's not here. He's here in spirit, but not in person. We'll get him back. But we're here to provide our personal commitments to this Good Neighbor Agreement. We've been hearing you over the past year and have also heard your most recent concerns, but more importantly, David and I are overseeing the design and construction of this facility and are committed to ensuring we follow through with these commitments. We'll hold our designers and contractors accountable for meeting these commitments and have a plan to meet with you regularly to provide updates on design progress and how we're meeting these commitments. I know we don't have a lot of design details to share just yet, but we're still early in the design process, and this is typical of the design process, and we'll have more details as we continue through the design and be able to demonstrate how we're meeting these commitments. This team through Benita is your point of contact, and we'll work as a team to hold our designers, contractors, and staff accountable and provide responses and our solutions as needed, and make sure we have the right representatives in those conversations. So using some of the feedback received from the online survey and previous communications with this group, as Dan mentioned, we've made some improvements to the wording of the Good Neighbor Agreement. And so the intent, as Dan also mentioned, is not to go through these commitments word for word, but note that some of your concerns are also our concerns, and we're committed to working with you to mitigate those concerns as we go through the design and construction of this facility. Moving on to, sorry, I'm caught a little off guard. Did the slides get reshuffled? Was
go back, yeah, Aubrey can go back to the first ones.
Sorry, to architecture. Fantastic. Sorry, Aubrey. So architecture, facility architecture design. So using multiple strategies, our team is going to design the facility structures to be as unobtrusive as possible and in keeping with the agricultural and rural nature of the area. Gosh, those are hard words to say for some reason. As we get further into the detailed design, we'll be able to share more information on building materials, the landscaping, and also the tower location. I know there was some comments in the survey regarding the tower location. So we'll be able to share more details on that going forward. Regarding the facility lighting and sound design, light and noise concerns were again common themes in the survey results, and we don't have details on lighting and noise mitigation just yet, but the design will use multiple strategies to minimize light and noise impacts to neighbors both during the day and at night. We will comply with Multnomah and our Clackamas County light and sound standards, and we'll have to demonstrate compliance with those standards as part of our land use application, including identifying types and location of lighting and noise mitigation. And this will also help ensure that we meet the commitments in the Good Neighbor Agreement. We'll, similar to many of these topics, we'll be able to share more specifics on lighting design and noise mitigation measures once we get further into design. We need to do more work on the site and building layouts and identify facility equipment before we can do more of that detailed work on the lighting and sound design. moving on to site landscaping, Aubrey, thank you. So reducing the facility visibility to the neighbors and the surrounding community is important to this team. Use of native plantings for the facility buffers has been a common theme throughout discussions with this group and the survey results. And so our design team will be developing landscape plans that use native plants and trees for the facility buffering. And then moving on to stormwater. This team is committed to understanding existing stormwater flows and creating a design that maintains current stormwater flows at the site and doesn't affect adjacent site neighbors. Design of stormwater management is a normal part of the design process and will be integrated into the facility design as it progresses. We'll use multiple stormwater design strategies and we'll continue discussions with the Johnson Creek Watershed Council to discuss stormwater management strategies. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Dan.
Great. I do want to press on one other thing, and that is one of the comments that has frequently come up and I believe was reiterated in the latest round was access points. As you mentioned, we're not into the detailed design yet of the facility nor its footprint, but access has become a question. I'm not asking you to tell us where access is going to be. It's more access is an important component of the design, and that will be part of that design effort, right? Determining the best place, getting this feedback from stakeholders and so on.
Correct, yes. We haven't finalized the access yet and are doing some further work to evaluate the best access to the site. And we'll be able to provide more information on that as we go forward. I think I missed part of your question, Dan.
No, that was it. It was the importance of that, the need to connect with the neighborhood as part of that ultimate decision process, and ultimately incorporating that into the frequent connections we're going to have in the coming months, September, January. Okay.
Yes.
Good. With that, John is next. John, of course, many of you know, is the construction manager here. And again, we're not going to ask him to go line by line through this, but he, of course, has detailed understanding of the construction component. And these words here reflect our draft language of commitment relative to construction, of course. So John, comments, reflections, thoughts relative to these words and commitment.
First off, good evening, folks. Good to see you again. And for those of you that don't know me, my name's John Johnson, as Dan noted. I'll be the construction manager for the filtration facility and the pipelines, and I'm currently working on the corrosion control improvement project. So with that being said, I'm also sitting here in a fairly rural environment, not too different from where you guys live. And there's somebody that's building a house down the road from my house, and they are importing quite a bit of fill, and the truck goes up and down the road. And, you know, I sit here as I work during the day, and I think about that, and I think about the work that we have in front of us. And I just want to say that your concerns are not lost on me. They're concerns that any and all of us can have, depending on where we might be located or what's going on around us. So the basic message that I have for you guys today is that, you know, a few of you know me. I've had the opportunity to meet a number of you. But for those of you that don't, I look forward to meeting you. And I'm going to be assigned to this project all the way through to the end. And your concerns about traffic or noise or dust or other construction impacts are important to me. You know, I think I come from a place where I understand your concerns, and I take those to heart. When this project is over, I want us to have a good relationship, and I want you to be able to say that I did my best for you to take care of you as best as we could. This is a big project. There will be impacts. Today, we delivered a 14-foot diameter, 55-foot tall soda ash silo to the corrosion control facility. And seeing that silo go down the road just really kind of hit home to me, one, how small the roads really are out there, and how we need to do whatever we can to make sure that those impacts are minimized, that folks know what's happening, that we provide prior notice, which I believe we've done a fairly good job with, and to continue that effort to communicate activities that we're going to do so that folks are prepared and can plan as best they can around things that we may have coming up. Just as we're going to try to make sure that we sequence or plan our work and route our work, trucks, et cetera, so that they have minimal impacts on you as neighbors and as members of the community out there. So with that, I don't have a ton more to say, except, you know, I hear you. I endure some of the same things that you guys are concerned about here at my own home. And I'm looking forward to making this experience as pleasant as possible for you throughout the duration of both the pipelines and the filtration facility.
Great, thank you, John. We are going to move on to Kim. The next slide does show some draft language associated with operations. And Kim, when you introduce yourself, give a little more about what your role really is going to be over the course of operations, ultimately when this facility is up and running, and reflect upon not only these words, but what else we've been hearing in the recent past.
Sure. So thanks, Dan. Good evening, folks. Similar to you all, I'll be excited when we no longer have to meet via Zoom. If I never have another Zoom meeting in my life, it will be too soon. So someday, hopefully, we'll be out of that whole scenario. As Dan mentioned, I'm Kimberly Gupta. I'll be in charge of operations of the facility after it's built. So basically, I will be your connection to operations once this plant is online. And like John and Michelle mentioned, we've been hearing you through the course of this Good Neighbor Agreement process, and I've tried to incorporate items into the agreement to address your concerns. And frankly, I share many of your concerns. Things like selecting inherently safer technologies to protect our staff and our neighbors. You know, this is something that is super important to me. And you know, I'll give you an example of one way we did that. You know, we went away from chlorine gas because there are some safety concerns with that. And we could have gone with sodium hypochlorite, which is very standard, very typical what water treatment plants all across the country use. But instead of choosing that, we decided to go with on-site hypogeneration. So that essentially means that what's going to be coming to the plant instead of sodium hypochlorite, is salt. And then we'll just make the hypochlorite on-site. So that's one example of an inherently safer technology that we're choosing that's going to be better for the folks that work there, and then also for you all that live around there. That's something that I'm pretty passionate about, pretty dedicated to. And you know, another, I think, example of a place where our interests frankly align are the tours. You know, I'm not a huge fan of having folks running through my plant. And so it is going to be any kind of tours that we have, educational tours, are going to be guided and scheduled. Folks won't just be showing up at the plant. It's going to be a very, very, there'll be set protocols for that. Because, you know, to run a water treatment plant effectively, we can't have people just showing up there. So that wouldn't work for any of us. You know, and I just, again, similar to what John and Michelle mentioned earlier, you know, I'm personally committed to ensuring that we follow through with the items that we laid out in the agreement as they relate to operations. And you have my promise to work with you if issues do arise. Contact Benita and she'll get a hold of me. We'll work through the issues that you all have. You know, I'm going to be working on this process through design, and then once the plant is built, it's mine, and I'm going to be here for a long time. So you guys know me. You'll know who to call, and yeah.
I'm going to have a clarifying question for you, Kim, and that
Sure.
is, you just mentioned it. You're going to be, of course, the plant supervisor, the direct operations lead. But it doesn't mean you're sitting on your laurels and waiting for Jonathan to hand you the keys to the facility, right? You are heavily involved in design, starting even a year ago. Is that true, right?
That is true. I have been involved with this process since the inception. I've been involved from the planning, through the design. I mean, I probably have as many design meetings, almost as many as Michelle and John, you know, 20 hours of meetings a week. to talk through the different elements of the design and what choices we're making. And you know, and this is great, right? Because I can bake in an operational perspective throughout the design to make sure that we're, and certainly others are thinking about this too, but you know, you're my neighbors basically. And so I'm thinking about these items as, you know, my neighbors down the road, you know, 7 years from now, are going to be concerned about these issues. So these are things that I'm thinking about all the time. And because I am involved with throughout the design very heavily and into the construction, I can make sure that I'm helping to make choices that are going to be the right thing for us once we move into the operational phase, once the plan is fully operational.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And this is, of course, open time for discussion. As you're thinking about any questions you might have or comments you want to put in the chat, we've said a few things I'd like to reiterate as part of what I've heard Bonita, Michelle, John, and Kim reiterate, and that is we are going to have another session, and that's next month. And we are asking Gabe Solmer to attend. And Gabe is the executive director of the entire Portland Water Bureau organization. Everybody you see here works for Gabe. She is the one that ultimately responds to the commissioner and the ultimate city council. So she has responsibility. And we thought it was important to hear from her directly, not just so we can hear it as support to and employees of Portland Water Bureau, but that you can hear it. So that will be part of our conversation in 4 weeks. Secondarily, I've heard each of these individuals share a personal commitment to not only the words that are written there, but to you, to the broader community. And I'm hopeful that there's earnestness in their voices and reflection upon what's important, that we hear you and that we're moving forward with improvements as best as we possibly can. So with that, comments, questions, we have a few minutes for that. Reactions, either raise your hand or put an element in the chat so we can either respond to the wording, suggestions for improvement, whatever it might be. All right, there's a question from Dean and Pat. So when might we have more information about access points? Okay, is that a Michelle question in terms of design timing for thinking through access points? Is that a fair person to point to, Michelle? It's really a question about timing, right? That's the question.
Yeah, I can jump in and help answer that one. So right now we're moving from our basis of design into 30% design. And as part of the 30% design, we'll be continuing work on the site layout. And as part of that, we'll be identifying those access points and the placement at the tower. So our 30% design is scheduled to finish up at the end of July. So following completion of 30% design, we'll have more specifics to be able to share on those two topics. I know just going back to some of our commitments and specifically regarding the tower, you know, we're committed to putting it in the location that has the least visual impact to the site. And so we're still evaluating the exact location, and we'll have more information to share as we get further into design.
So we'll make a note here, and we'll make sure that as part of our September and January check-ins, that access will be part of that conversation. Okay. Jay has a question. This is a good question, and it might be for bigger brains than ours, but it's a good one to continue to ask, and it's about adjacent property values. And I know it's a tough question, but I guess the thought is who might best react to that. Michelle, maybe from a design standpoint, is that appropriate? I guess the question is, do adjacent property values come into the consideration? What's the thought about that? Is Michelle the best person? I'm not sure. Let's start with her.
Sure, I'll start. We don't anticipate impacts to property values once the facility is constructed and online. So we don't have any plans to mitigate long-term impacts to property values because we're not anticipating any.
We have another question about 30% design, including stormwater plan. Michelle, same question. What level of detail, I guess, comes with stormwater as part of that site layout?
Yeah, so the 30% design will include some early design for the stormwater. It won't be final at that point. It will be a start, and it's a normal part of the design process. You know, we'll get the 30% design. It'll get reviewed. Our design reviewers will have the opportunity to comment on that design and provide feedback. So it won't be final at 30%, but it will continue to evolve throughout the design. And I'm just following your chat here. Yes, the 30% design will have some level of information on contours as part of the site layouts and
Okay.
civil site design.
And Pat Meyer is, again, reiterating the point about property values. Michelle, you mentioned that once the facility is constructed, right, that's one time frame. As part of this assessment, maybe not so much design, but the planning effort, do property value impacts come into play as part of an evaluation of the location and so on? How does that work in terms of that decision process is, I guess, the question.
Can you restate your question? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm looking at Pat Meyer's question about how about property value impacts during the 7-year building process. Is the assessment of any reduction or even improvement in property values associated with the construction process taken into account during the design?
We don't take that into account as part of the design process. I mean, yeah, it's not a consideration during the design process. And honestly, I'm not sure how we could take that into consideration. Just again, other than, you know, we've got our commitments during construction, and we are, you know, this team and our contractors will be held accountable to meeting those commitments during construction to minimize impacts to adjacent property owners.
Okay. All right. It looks like Jay Knapp has a question. Do you want to verbalize that question?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I was just noting that I believe it was Michelle said you don't anticipate property values changing with the addition of the filtration plant. I'm really curious to know what the basis of your anticipation is, whether you have data that's compared it to other sites. It does seem striking to me that property values would be impacted by proximity to a large facility.
Yeah, we don't have any specific data to point to, but based on this type of facility and that it's a water treatment facility, it's not expected to produce, you know, odors or noise. It's a pretty quiet facility. Once it's operating, it won't have a lot of, you know, traffic either. So because of those things, we don't anticipate an impact in property values.
Well, for the people that are going to be living very close to it, I mean, if you're mistaken, I mean, that could have, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars of impact. So it seems to me like a very, you know, high value thing to be taking sort of rather casually. I think this thing could probably be proven proven pretty well with some hard data. You guys haven't done that?
We have not put together any hard data or research to look at property value, impact to property values. And I guess to your comment of taking it very casually, I'm not taking it very casually, but just you know, again, this type of facility, it's not to be, you know, it's not a noise or odor or smoke producing facility, and it'll be pretty quiet, and we'll be designing it to fit into the surrounding community so that, you know, hopefully it's not a noticeable facility any more so than some of the other businesses that are out there.
Well, you say you're designing it into the local neighborhood, but there's no other building that looks like that in the local neighborhood. And your own acoustic studies have proven that the noise levels are going to be higher than they are ambiently. I mean, the noise studies you've conducted to date show that what you're going to do is you're going to comply with the code requirements, but that's substantially different than the current state of acoustic measurements out there. So I don't know. I mean, on one hand, you say you're not taking it casually, but you don't have, you know, you're not showing one shred of data. And, you know, I just cited, you know, noise and, you know, building architecture type, and it doesn't match either of those.
Here's a suggestion. We might not have the technical expertise to answer the question as well as we hope to. It is a good one. It is one where we're concerned about the value of property, not just during construction, but also following on because of either the facility itself being present and or what's happening because of acoustics or lighting or whatever it might be. How about we as a team, with Benita taking the lead on this, how about we approach the internal brains of Portland Water Bureau and get some additional insight onto what's been done in the past relative to compensation and or impacts relative to property values. And let's then have that information available for our next conversation in a month. And it could be one that we provide some data. It could be one where we end up not finding the data that's comparable, but at least we'll have a reflection as to how the Portland Water Bureau responds to these kinds of questions and what we can be prepared for in terms of the Good Neighbor Agreement. Is that a fair suggestion that we get some additional insight into this? Okay.
I think it's a start. I wouldn't call it fair. I mean, the fact that you're bringing up that you're going to use the internal brains of PWB, why not use some external brains, you know, some objective input from some outside sources that don't have a, you know, dog in the fight, so to speak. And so why don't you get some, you know, objective analysis? And I think you guys should be prepared for some objective input from the neighbors if they produce data to the contrary. And I think if they do, it should be embedded in your Good Neighbor Agreement, acknowledging it.
Okay. Yeah, you're definitely asking a series of questions here. There's probably a legal ramification, there's a regulatory ramification, and so on and so forth. But yes, we're not suggesting that Portland Water Bureau is going to be the end-all be-all in terms of an agreement or not relative to property values. But since it is such a uniquely personal and connected item to this neighborhood, it's worth the question as to what it is that we can and should be doing relative to property values, not just understanding it, but what kind of language could be placed into the Good Neighbor Agreement itself. Okay, other questions? Pat Meyer has her hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm actually kind of surprised that since you've been going around about this for 3 years and the neighbors have been saying the same thing for the last 3 years, that you have not to date been able to answer some of the questions that Jeff proposed. That said, we're all aware of what's happening in the construction industry right now and the cost of goods. What I'd like to know is, how do you factor that into the planned 1.2 plus billion dollar plant. At what point does this plant become completely unaffordable for the ratepayers of Portland? Would 4 times that amount be reasonable? Would 5 times? We all see what's happening with inflation. And I want to know, at what point are you willing to acknowledge that it is going to be a huge albatross to the Portland ratepayers? Thank you.
Okay. It sounds like it's, well, Jonathan, I'm thinking maybe, is there a response relative to at least construction costs, just to give a sample of what you're seeing? And then maybe there's a bigger question about the decision making at the city council level, even about what is becoming affordable or not affordable. John, what about the kind of the grounded kind of construction cost element?
Yeah, I mean, Pat's exactly right. I mean, raw materials are jumping in price currently. You know, it's something we're really concerned about. We're looking at as well, because you know, the project doesn't start right now. It starts a few years from now. You know, late October 2023 or something along those lines is what we're thinking or forecasting. So are those costs going to still be valid then? I hope not. I mean, a 2x4 costs $8 today if you want to go down to Lowe's and buy one. I looked this past weekend, where that same 2x4 was, I don't know, $2.75 a few months ago, or, you know, a year ago. So are those prices going to stay? I hope not, because if they do, it's going to be impactful for everybody. Everybody that wants a new home or wants to do a home improvement or what have you. It'll definitely have an impact on the facility. Hopefully those costs are a blip, and they will correct and get back to where they need to be prior to the time when we're actually having to buy materials for the project. But it's definitely a point of concern, and it's something that we're looking at for sure. As far as the overall budget of the project goes, that's going to be a decision that's made by City Council, and thankfully far over my head on what the go no-go price would be. So
to press on that, and maybe Michelle can provide some more, though, the management of Portland Water Bureau, Gabe Solmer, and of course the commissioner and the city council is made aware of costs at certain phases or stages of delivery of design. And they, of course, their purview, they're the decision makers. So Michelle, any more a little more detail about when that occurs? We of course can't prognosticate what city council will decide, but that does take place as part of the process, right?
Yes, absolutely. And John is right. You know, city council ultimately has the authority, but part of our communications to council and regular engagement with council on an annual basis, we do provide cost updates to them, and we'll be doing that. And you know, also it is a responsibility of this team that if we see cost going higher as a result of the estimates that we're getting from the designers and the contractors on the project, it's our duty as a team to then evaluate cost saving measures to help bring this project back in line with the project budget. And we most recently did that, you know, through a value engineering process with our filtration facility designer. And so we'll be constant throughout the design of this project. We'll be constantly keeping cost in mind and identifying ways to minimize the cost of this project and build in cost saving measures to ensure that we can deliver this project within the original budget that was identified.
Jeff, Nat, you seem to have another question.
Yeah, I do. I was going to ask, when does the PWB plan to go to land use zoning to change the zoning? sorry, to go to land use to get the change in zoning.
We will not be requesting a change in zoning for the filtration facility site because it is already, the current zoning for the site allows for a water treatment facilities such as the one we're designing.
Doesn't it require a variance or a conditional use permit?
Yes, it does require it does require a conditional use approval, but it is still an allowed use, but we'll have to demonstrate that we meet the requirements for land use approval as part of that conditional use.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I didn't choose my words well. When does the PWB plan to go and submit for the conditional use approval?
We'll be submitting our land use application about the time of 60% design. So that's towards the end of next year.
Towards the end of 2022?
Sorry, I'm in the wrong year, but to end of this year, early 2022. Sorry about that. Yeah.
Okay. Wouldn't it have been more prudent to have gotten that prior to investing this many millions of dollars? I mean, because there is some potential risk, isn't there?
There is potential risk, but we can't get a land use approval until we've taken the design. We can't even submit an application to get land use approval and demonstrate our compliance with the land use approval criteria until we've gone through a certain level of design, because we have to be able to show through our design that we meet the applicable land use criteria.
I'm actually going to go back to a question that's in the chat. Dan Newberry asked a question about acoustics and how far from the building or the source are the decibel readings taken. I don't. Michelle, are you the best person to respond to that?
I can try to answer that question. So I guess a clarification is are you referring to the existing acoustic work that has been done, or are you asking specifically about code requirements on where those are taken?
Yeah, it's more on the code side. I was referring to the slide that you put up about 50 and 60 decibels, which is kind of the cap that you were going to have. And I'm just wondering where that's taken, because if I understand the code correctly, isn't it at the property line where the readings are taken? Isn't that the way that works?
I'm going to say I don't know the exact answer to that off the top of my head. I see Casey is responding in the chat that readings are taken at the property lines. You know, we could certainly go back and verify that in the code language. I
just have a question about that follow-up, since I've been involved in similar things in another county, construction projects, and most code does that, you know, property line. But the thing is, for a project like this, if you're going to have noise readings that can have those standards 24 hours during the day, nobody is going to notice at all. But if you have that 50 decibels at night, depending on how close the nearest house is to the property line, they could actually be hearing that all night long. So that was just a question I had.
Gotcha.
Okay. Was there one other question from Charlie, it looks like? What happens if the land use criteria conflicts with what is agreed upon in the Good Neighbor Agreement? I think we're going to do our best not to have that conflict, but Michelle, would you validate that?
Yes, agree. That is certainly not our intent or goal with this Good Neighbor Agreement. And I think I can pretty confidently say that what we've put in the Good Neighbor Agreement, I don't think it's going to be in conflict with any of our land use criteria.
Gotcha. Great questions. Aubrey, could you move?
Can I just jump in there too to say
of course.
it may actually be more stringent than what we have in this agreement.
Yeah, we don't know. We'll find that out. Last 5 minutes, I respect your time. Always good comments and reactions. Appreciate the thoughtful questions. As a reminder, I'll cover this. Bonita can give some additional reflection upon this. The Good Neighbor Agreement and the commitment statements will be brought to you in electronic form for another review and the finalization of that on the 10th. And we have a plan to have conversations yet to be detailed in September and January. Obviously, design, as you just heard Michelle talk, is going to be a big component over the coming 6 or 7 months. So where we are in design, up to 60%, it sounds like, by the end of the calendar year or close to it. So that will be information that we can share with this group. Bonita?
Yeah, so it's just exactly what you said. I mean, as we mentioned earlier, we want to continue the conversation on as we get to these milestones. You know, there's not going to be a lot of activity for folks to respond to as we wrap up this design or get further through this design, but we do want to, as we make progress through that, keep you updated and get feedback on what's happening. So we do have that meeting in September, and then we're planning for our next meeting to be in January 2022. And then, you know, as we move into construction, I imagine that we probably get into more frequent meetings again.
Right. I do see one additional question from Pat Meyer, and this might be a question for Bonita. Why sign agreement before seeing final design? It's part of design, right? We want to get this understanding as part of design to bake in whatever we come to conclusion on as to being important. Is that right, Bonita?
Yes, and I think a lot of people have noted even in our survey that, you know, some of these statements seem pretty vague, and that's not by accident because we don't know a lot about the design yet. So we want to be able to have some flexibility. Once we get through the design, we'll have some options to make things a little bit more specific about what we can commit to do.
Right. Aubrey, do we have any more slides that we wanted to cover today in this hour chat? Okay. Can I go around the horn quickly? Start with Michelle, go to Jonathan, and then Kim, and then come back to Bonita as any final 30-second or less thoughts and commitment?
Yeah. Did you say you wanted me to start?
Yes, Michelle, go first.
So, yeah, I'll try to keep this less than 30 seconds, but I do want to reiterate our commitment. You know, in my former life, I was a design engineer for 12 years and designed water treatment facilities, spent time at a lot of facilities. And I am confident that our team can produce a design that upholds the commitments in this Good Neighbor Agreement. And like Bonita said, they are vague because we don't have a lot of information yet. But I know as the design process evolves, we'll have more and more details to share with you. And I'm confident we'll be able to show you that we're meeting these commitments.
Great. John?
Thanks, Dan. Just similar to what Michelle said, you know, I'm going to be here through the end of the project, and I hope that we can be friends at the end of it, and that we can, you know, help you, and you can help me make this project a success and as minimally impactful as possible.
Great. Kim?
You know, the same thing, you know, basically I'm going to be your neighbor forever. Other people can leave, but you and I will be there together at the end of this. So I'll look forward to working with you all as we go through this process, and then as the facility comes online and is operational.
All right. Thank you, Kim. Bonita, close us out.
Sure. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for everybody that's been here. And I know this has been a process, and we recognize that this is not a project that a lot of people want in their community, regardless of what community that you live in. We recognize that this is not something that's desired, but this is also something that we as the Water Bureau have been tasked to do. And we want to complete it in the best way that we can. And I know this is going to be hard to believe, but I am your advocate. I am the one that, you come to me, talk to me. I'm the one that's pushing people to give me the details. I'm the one that's going to, John will tell you, I'm annoying. I will come to him and say, I need to know when this is happening. It's got to be in a timely manner. I am the person that's going to be making sure that, everybody is accountable for it. We're making resolutions for the issues that come up. So please reach out to me when you can, or if you have issues, recognizing that we're not in the position to stop the project, but we want to do the best that we can. With that, I'll let you close it out, Dean.
Thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate it. It's 7:01. Have a great rest of your evening, everybody.